Good morning to all of you. Today we are congregated here to have a discussion on how a compelling script can bring a picture in motion. To take this discussion ahead, we have a power-packed panel of some of the best in Indian film industry. We have with us Sri Shoojit Sarkar, who has been the writer of some of the classics such as The Vicky Donor, Tikoo, Gulabo Sitabo, and the recent one being the Sardar Udham with Vicky Kaushal playing the Indian revolutionary Udham Singh. The movie has got a huge positive response around the globe. We also have with us Miss Vani Tripathi Tikoo, who is an actor, a producer by profession, and is one of the youngest ever member of the CBFC. She has been closely working with the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting and the Government of India. We also have with us the ever loved Rumy Jafry on the panel. He's been giving super hits for last 30 years, and we have all grown up watching these laughter bags such as the BV number one, Dosti, Houseful, Golmaal Returns, and the list is very long. We also have with us the young film strategist, Ms. Pratiksha Rao, who is currently a director, films and licensing in Netflix. She has a rich experience to have spearheaded some of the major deals with the local studios, bringing box office success and contributing audience friendly films to Netflix. I would like to throw a special attention that this discussion will be led by the visionary filmmaker, Sri Shekhar Kapur, who is the creator of India's best cinema. And over to you, sir, to take this session ahead from this point.
I think what we're talking about is scripts leading to films. A script is just one part of the process of creating something. I think that whether it's films, it's made on the script, from script it goes to film, and the creating, which is going to be completely different. If a script completely dominates a film, then you don't need a director. You just need an executor. You could take a DOP who could do that. Then from the filming, it goes to editing. It's just another whole thing. You'll get it. All my films, every film that I've met, when I've ever met people, when they looked at Bandit Queen script or Masoom script, why are you even doing this? This is terrible. The script's terrible. And I would say, no, I see something in it that you don't. So that's what an artist does. I'm looking out at something. Picasso would have created something, some artist. If film or the work of a director is the work of art, then there's an interpretation. So a script is there. From there, there's an interpretation. And after the finish, as a director, I have to hand it over to an editor and another interpreting. And by the time what comes on the cinema, or what people see, whether it's OTT or there, then it's going to be very dull. That means that there are no other interpretations of that. So that's what I've always believed. My worst films are the ones that I've completely followed the script. My best films are the ones which is like, if you give me a 10 pages of something and say interpret 10 pages into a 3-hour movie, I would rather do that, rather than follow somebody else's. What's the problem? I know Pratiksha is going to fight with me on this, but the problem is that when you are giving scripts to executives, Pratiksha, I'm not talking about you, but generally in Hollywood, they are not artists, they're not interpreters, right? So they think, I don't get from A to B. How do you get from A to B? Mujhe samjhao. Tell me. So, acha, that's how you get. So why is it not in the dialogue? One of my biggest discussions with Kate Blanchett was, Shekhar, we have such a problem. There's such gaps in I said, but those gaps are the reason you got the Oscar. Because you had to constantly interpret. Without interpretation, who are you as an actor? If you're or a director, or then an editor, at every level there's an interpretation. Okay, I'm going to throw it over. Then I'll come back to how the idea of this 3-act structure is a nonsense, complete nonsense. हमने बता दिया, अरे सिर दर्द है, हाँ, ठीक है. It's as simple as I have a headache, doctor. But the 3-act structure, what is a 3-act structure? हमने कुछ बता लिया है because people have said अच्छा हमको समझाओ 3 act स्ट्रक्चर, आपका स्क्रिप्ट है वो 3 act स्ट्रक्चर कैसे आएगा उसमें? It's just a domination game. There's no meaning to this idea of 3 act structure. Over to you guys. Who's going to be? Come on, take me on.
I'm
Shoojit.
happy to do a quick response, but I think the writers and directors in the forum should share their point of view.
Uh,
Why don't
I
we
mean,
start with Shoojit? You've just
I'm
done
actually
a uh,
you made more films than I have, more
you've just
successful
done
than
a
I
film which is
no,
a subject which has been
have.
wide in the open.
And you
Udham Singh.
between your writing and your directing, how do you separate the two?
uh, so I'm saying what you are saying is, I mean, of course, absolute truth that we face every day when we are, you know, trying to recreate that film or the script or the idea, you know. Uh, uh, but I somehow feel it depends from person to person, director to director, how, you know, and also subject, you know, kind of subject. Some subjects are, I mean, I'll tell you my example. Some of the films that I've done absolutely on the script itself. You know, I've spent so much time creating the script versus shooting and editing, and of course the other process is editing. But you know, the second part, making the film, actually has been quite simple and easy for me in terms of what I have done, whatever. Um, but in certain other scripts, uh, a lot was dependent on the you know, and an interpretation in terms of reimagining the entire thing. You know, you have certain scene, you have certain character, but you still have to reimagine uh, lot of your gut and a lot of your intuitions to get the character or the expression or the meaning out. Um, so what the I think we've been introduced that, you know, it's become a modern day necessity of a good screenplay. I think some of the best screenplays are done already. You know, in the golden period of the cinema, what the Ray or the Ghatak or the Mrinal Sen's or the films that's been done. I think some of the best screenplays are already been done, I feel. Even with your film Bandit Queen, you know, whatever you have done on that, you know, on what basis, but I think you had certain basis of a screenplay, which I think gives us a platform to take on the next step, whether it's casting or the other process of the filmmaking. So, so I think we need to have that, those writers who will just create those screenplays for the directors, because I'm not a writer at all, so I depend on writers and screenwriting. So I'm
Sujit,
completely
I'm
for a
going to
screenwriter.
interfere. I'm, I'm going to ask you, when you are working with a writer, when you're writing, how much are you imagining visual? How much of the
Uh,
visuals
uh,
do you actually see?
so my process in all the films has been that I don't stop the writer giving me words, spoken words, or whatever. You know, if that particular scene is complete that I wanted, then on the second stage where I take the film, where I possibly delete the dialogues, you know, the spoken lines, and then get into the visual. But in the process when I am engaging with the writer, I normally don't stop them. I just let it be. But of course, it is a visual medium. Half of the thing can be spoken. You know, it's completely visual, which sometimes we forget and, you know, start to word everything out. So uh, you're absolutely right that, you know, I engage completely and also in visual terms a lot of things, because at the end of the day you are sitting here on the top seeing the film in terms of gauging the film, so you know where the visuals are and where the spoken words are.
Yeah. To me, the best films are where, you see, if you take a film like Godfather, right? Every time you see the film, you will reinterpret. Okay, let me take my favorite film of all time, 2001: Space Odyssey. I see it once every year, and once every year it tells me a different story. Because what the film allows me to do is to who I am at this moment, what I've learned, whatever wisdom I have or don't have, I see the film in context of myself. But if a film doesn't allow me to see the film in context of myself, then it just dies. But when I see a great film, I can see it again and again and again because each time I'm looking at a different story because I'm relating myself to that story. So it doesn't matter when I first saw it when I was 15, and the next time see it when I'm 60. I'm telling a different story because I'm now 60, and the film I saw is different to me. And that fundamental thing happens because of the gaps in the telling of the story. Because you are asking the audience to fill those gaps. And in the filling of those gaps is where the audience engagement happens because they bring their own story and fill those gaps. Anyway, I'm going to go. Who'll take me on that? Rumi,
Shekhar,
how do you select
I
your director?
think
Go ahead. Go
हाँ
ahead,
मैं
Vani.
so
no,
मैं
I'm
जो
just
है
saying that you're talking about the gaps and how you reinterpret screenplays and stories and films over time. I think it's also the reinterpretation of the time, Shekhar. I mean, what cinema was 40 years ago or a couple of decades ago, it's not the same. I mean, there is so much, and I
Yeah,
know you don't like this word, and a lot of filmmakers don't like this new word, the new idiom in
yeah,
COVID times, which has emerged, which is called content. At the end of the time, at the end of the day, it's storytelling. I mean, whether it's a web series, whether it's a play, whether it's film, it's storytelling. And again, the reinterpretation of that narrative belongs to the time in which we are, isn't it, Shekhar? And that's why,
yeah.
what is it that differentiates a film which is called a cult film like the Space Odyssey that you just mentioned, or whatever is called a classic, and what is called a contemporary narrative of cinema, as we call it? I think it's also
That's
the
why.
times which represent the storytelling narratives of what we see, happening around us, being projected, on
Well, that means that
screens.
the film must allow you to do that. No?
You
If you
know,
see Devdas,
in this,
uh,
yeah, in this
Sujeet,
context, like for example, uh, uh, Ray's, whether we take Pather Pachali or even the Bicycle Thief, or Spielberg is just coming out with, say, West Side Story, which is a very known Broadway musical, and which already done a film with some 10 Oscars or something, and again been reinterpreted now. So, so uh, there is I mean, most of the classics of the cinema, whatever you know, relevance that what you're trying to say is, of course, is a present time, and you will interpret it in a present time. But I think cinema has never lost that basic context of relevance. What I feel, Garam Hawa is still relevant, you know. So, or films like I just made this film, whatever, in uh, Pink, uh, long back, in 15. So which spoke about no means no, which is, I mean, there were people who came up to me and just, I mean, in my time also it was similar, but it was not spoken that way. But what I'm trying to say is any art form will have find certain kind of a relevance uh, in that time also and now also. That's why I think uh, the intelligence and the depth of a screenplay knowledge, especially the person who's doing it, the the wisdom what Shekarji started in the beginning, are so important when a screenwriter comes on the project.
okay. Rumi,
जी
you tell me, how do
अपनी समझ है
do you always get
स्क्रिप्ट
along with your directors, or do you hate your directors?
नो नो मैं भाई मेरी अपनी जो समझ है स्क्रीन प्ले की मुझे ऐसा लगता है
जी,
कि स्क्रीन प्ले फिल्म का सबसे अहम हिस्सा होता है मैं मतलब आपकी जो अभी आपने मिसाल दी सुजीत ने मिसाल दी उसी को मैं बताऊंगा कि जैसे बैंडिट क्वीन की कहानी हम सबको पता थी पूरे हिंदुस्तान को पता थी लेकिन उस फिल्म को आदमी बार बार देखता है, वो एंड तक होल्ड करती है, इसलिए उसका स्क्रीन प्ले बहुत अच्छा लिखा हुआ है। अभी सुजीत ने फिल्म बनाई है उधम सिंह, मैंने देखी, मुझे बहुत अच्छी लगी। हम सबको पता है कहानी क्या है, उधम सिंह की कहानी क्या है, जलियांवाला बाग की कहानी क्या है। लेकिन मैंने सबको फिल्म देखने के बाद बोला कि उसका स्क्रीन प्ले इतना ब्रिलियंट लिखा हुआ है कि हमको क्या लगता है कि फिल्म शुरू होगी, जलियांवाला बाग होगा, उसके बाद उसने जाके मारा था। लेकिन सुजीत ने ऐसा नहीं किया, उन्होंने पहले मारा, लोग जलियांवाला बाग का वेट कर रहे हैं। तो स्क्रीन प्ले जो होता है फिल्म का, मुझे ऐसा लगता है कई बार लोग जो है, अभी सुजीत ने बहुत अच्छी बात बोली कि कई बार लोग डायलॉग को स्क्रीन प्ले का हिस्सा समझ लेते हैं। डायलॉग स्क्रीन प्ले नहीं है। आप जो डायलॉग डायलॉग राइटर लिख दिया, आप उसको काट के, डायरेक्टर का काम है वही बात वो विजुअली दिखा सकता है। लेकिन जैसे कितनी फिल्म होती हैं कि हमारी लव स्टोरीज होती है, कमर्शियल सिनेमा मैंने बहुत लिखा है, तो उसमें हमको पता है कि एंड में लड़का लड़की को मिलना है, लेकिन कैसे मिलना है वो स्क्रीन प्ले। अभी मैंने फिल्म बनाई है चेहरे, आप समझ लीजिए 70% फिल्म जो है वो एक सीन है। जैसा आप बोल रहे थे ना कि आपको 10 पेज दे दे आप पूरी पिक्चर बना सकते हैं, तो मैंने कहा मैं भी कुछ नया करता हूं, लेकिन उसमें भी एक सीन में भी डायलॉग के थ्रू स्क्रीन प्ले है कि वो होल्ड करे। तो मुझे ऐसा लगता है कि और कंटेंट की जो बात है, मुझे लगता है कि पहले भी जैसे अभी बाइसिकल थी वो, चाहे सत्यजीत रे की फिल्म हो, गुरुदत्त की फिल्म हो, कंटेंट तब भी इंपॉर्टेंट था, कंटेंट अब भी इंपॉर्टेंट है। कंटेंट के बगैर हम कितनी फिल्म देखते हैं एक ही डायरेक्टर की कि यार ये फिल्म कमाल है, और उसी डायरेक्टर की दूसरी फिल्म हमको शूट अच्छी होती है लेकिन कमाल नहीं लगती, उसका स्क्रीन प्ले ठीक नहीं है। अब आप जैसे कमर्शियल सिनेमा में मैं हमेशा मिसाल देता हूँ मिस्टर इंडिया की। एक तो मुझे ऐसा लगता है स्क्रीन पे जो मैंने सीखा है आप सब सीनियर लोगों से, कि स्क्रीन फिल्म जब आदमी देखे तो उसमें बिलीव करना चाहिए कि जो मैं देख रहा हूँ वो सच देख रहा हूँ। जैसे मिस्टर इंडिया, हम ये बिलीव करते हैं कि हाँ वो घड़ी से आदमी गायब होता है, वो काम है स्क्रीन प्ले का, कैसे उसने उस पूरी चीज को बाद में डायरेक्टर उसको उतना बिलीवेबल और शूट करता है। लेकिन स्क्रीन प्ले मुझे लगता है बहुत जरूरी है एक अच्छी फिल्म के।
Pratiksha needs
Rumi,
to say now.
you're frozen. You're frozen.
Pratiksha is waiting in the wings.
after the makers have spoken, no, I am inclined to agree a lot with what Rumi ji also said, that screenplay kind of just gives the lays the foundation for what the film is going to be. But to your point earlier, Mr. Kapur, I think for us also as a platform, of course, the script, the screenplay is very important, but the director's vision, that is like equally, if not more important. Because at the end of the day, you're taking a few words and then translating them into something truly magical on screen, and what the vision of the director is, and sometimes there could be films which are so plot driven and you get the full understanding of it just based on the screenplay. Otherwise, they may be very, very treatment driven, where it's very important to understand how how the filmmaker is thinking of actually taking something perhaps a little bit more concept driven and translating it into a truly engaging story. So both those things are, equally important. And of course, it is a creative leap of faith we all take, turning something from a piece of paper into a 2 hour or longer story. So that process is always, and that's why you have to believe in the vision of the maker. But I think a lot of you talked about some of these very iconic stories, and my personal belief is that good stories are ones which are always timeless. They move you, and great stories are ones that will move you in different ways each time you watch them. So you talked a little bit about Space Odyssey and how you have a different interpretation of it each time you watch it. So a great example of a great story.
So, Pratiksha, I'm going to ask you, put you on the line here. Shall I tell you what my vision, if you had asked me when I set out to make Bandit Queen, because you've all talked about Bandit Queen, if you asked me that time, Kiwi, what is your vision as a director? I would look at you and saying, I can tell you very honestly, was angry. Because when I was first asked to be the director, I said, I don't know anything about her. And then I went and I realized, of course, I knew something. I used to live in Delhi, and she was not that far away from Delhi. So the whole vision of the film was my anger at myself for not seeing this, to not seeing and realizing what was going on around me. And then I went and I thought about it, and when I started to research it, I realized that somewhere I am the rapist. I am responsible as a man. So the whole film was just me thinking at myself, and that's why the film came out that way. More than the screenplay, it was me just being angry at myself, as if I was the rapist. Now I come to you and I said, "That's my vision." See, it's very difficult sometimes to explain what drove the film. A film that I desperately wanted to, and I finally said no, was Long Walk to Freedom, Nelson Mandela story. I spent a year and a half researching, doing ultimately the screenplay that the producers wanted me to make. Felt the same story. Felt like somebody who's written it in Los Angeles, sitting next to a swimming pool. Manika, that's just a very Western point of view of Mandela. If the story of Mandela doesn't make your hair stand on end against this idea, to me, Mandela was just about. I heard her think, yeah, black people, they're kids, they're not fully formed human beings. That's why I wanted to make Mandela. I wanted to tell the story of the crazy white man that thought that they were superior. That was my vision. And when I was constantly fighting with the studios on that film, I said, I'm not going to make this because there's no anger in it. I want to make this from the of those people that were oppressed. I want to be the oppressed person fighting you. But I'm just seeing an autobiography of Mandela written. What a great story, what a great man. That's not the idea. So sometimes I'm just expressing the director's vision is one emotion, and that starts to
I think
percolate.
you said something really powerful, that if your vision for Bandit Queen was not just to tell the story about this one woman and this happened to her and this was her life, but actually it was much more than that. I think that's what reflects also in the film. Like it makes it something really magical. And even if somebody had no idea who she is, somebody is not from India, they, this movie, the story would still resonate with them. So actually your vision, I mean, the way you stated it makes the story more interesting. And I would then have said that this is really fascinating, tell me more. We need to set up another meeting to hear what you're thinking a bit more, and how, again,
You
what
know,
that process is that we discussed, but your desire to tell this story, that's like really interesting and unique, and could make the story into something really magical.
yeah, but that's where it all ends. If I came to you with that vision, Pratiksha, what I just said, Bandit Queen, said, let's take another meeting, tell me more, I'd never come to the second meeting. But then that's who I am, That's why, I don't make that many films, because I don't want to be stuck because I don't see myself as a director. I see myself as a storyteller and an artist. And I just want to be set free to make that. There is a certain amount of rebelliousness in every art. You know, if you look at Picasso's Guernica, he's so angry, and you can see it in the painting. Then Van Gogh was
Spanish
asked
Civil
to,
War.
yeah, who was starving. He was schizophrenic. His brother was the greatest, biggest, richest art dealer in Paris, and he said to him, "Yeah, what sells today is landscapes and flowers and things. You have to do that." So he went and created the sunflower. And you go and see the sunflower, in every stroke you see the agony of one man, every stroke. So how do you sell that vision? You know what I mean? It's a tough business for us, because we're asked to sell visions to people who haven't been through the same process as we have. You know, ask a blind man, how does it feel? How do you see color? I see color. And you say, but you're blind. How do you see color? I don't see the same color as you do, but I see color. How is that? They do see, right? Blind people see. What do they see? I said, that's my film. What do I see? I'm sorry, I can go on like this because I thought about these things a lot. And where are we headed? Is it worth me making films
Yeah,
anymore if I have to explain who I am as a vision of a story? I am the story. Otherwise, why am I making that? Why am I even gone through it? Pink was a fantastic movie. But if you hadn't been in that position yourself, I just said something. Somebody asked me, and I got into trouble with that statement. They said, "How do you make your character?" I said, "Like in Bandit Queen, I was a rapist and the raped both in that scene. I had to constantly transfer myself." And I remember with Ashok Mehta, he was the only one who knew I was going to edit the scene. It was nothing. It was just a girl lying with close-ups and a door opening and closing, and I was feeling sick. I was puking throughout that shooting of the scene. How do I explain that to anybody? You know what I mean? How do I bring my whole total self to something? Because that's what an artist does. Anyway, Rumy, you go ahead. Tell me. This is what a director does. What do you do?
कुछ नहीं, मैं मतलब मैं भी जैसा मतलब आप लोगों से जो जो कभी सुनता हूँ, रोज सीखता हूँ कुछ ना कुछ। मैंने जितनी फिल्म अभी तक लिखी है या डायरेक्ट की हैं, तो मैं भी कोशिश करता हूँ कि जिस कैरेक्टर को लिख रहा हूँ उसको थोड़ा उसमें उसकी स्किन में जाके उसको जीने की कोशिश करूँ, चाहे उसका डायलॉग लिखूँ, स्क्रीन पे लिखूँ या उसको डायरेक्ट करूँ। लेकिन क्योंकि मैंने आप जैसे इतना ग्रेट सिनेमा नहीं बनाया है, तो इसलिए
अरे यार,
मैं क्योंकि मैंने पूरी जिंदगी कमर्शियल सिनेमा बनाया है, तो और ज्यादातर कॉमेडी बनाई, बहुत ईमानदारी से मैं बता रहा हूँ। लेकिन मैं ये जानता हूँ कि वो भी मेरे लिए बहुत मुश्किल है, बहुत सीरियसली काम करना पड़ता है, तब लोग हंसते हैं। तो मेरी भी कोशिश ये होती है, जो मेरा थिएटर का तजुर्बा है इतने साल का, क्योंकि मैंने थिएटर में प्लेज भी लिखी है और एक्टिंग भी की है, तो मुझे कैरेक्टर के अंदर उसकी स्किन में जाना थोड़ा सा रियाज है मेरा, कम से कम 35-40 साल का, जो वाणी अच्छी तरह समझ सकती है, क्योंकि वाणी भी जो है एनएसडी से आती है। तो उसका तजुर्बा मुझे बहुत फायदा देता है लिखने में। और अभी जैसे आप लोगों से सीख के मैंने जो एक नया तजुर्बा किया है, कि जो फिल्म मेरी चेहरे, आप जरूर अगर आप नहीं देखिए देखिएगा, उसमें मैंने स्क्रीन पे डायलॉग और कैरेक्टर सब में एक नया एक्सपेरिमेंट किया है, जिसमें यही कोशिश की है कि मैं मतलब एक ऐसा सिनेमा बना सकूं जो लगे कि मतलब होता है ना कि एक 4-5 सीन या 6 सीन का स्क्रीन प्ले लिख के भी आदमी फिल्म बना सकता।
I want to throw open I want to throw open something to both you, Shekhar and Shoojit, and also Rumy Bhai. There is a certain distinction which is started to occur because Bandit Queen was also a book. You know, it was Mala Sen's book, and of course, but
The book was
that's
written
what.
on the screen.
Well, see, so
Anyway,
I mean, imagine this is a reverse. There is a certain distinction which has started to occur in environs around us where screenplays are being written and films are being made. Where people say that when you acquire rights for a book, it's different from, say, if Pink can be bracketed into an event which led to, you know, the whole film being a full-blown, reaction to what happens to these three girls, you know, in that one night. Is there a distinction when it comes to already published material which is in public space, turning into a screenplay and then finding its journey onto the screen, vis-a-vis a trigger of an event or an idea, which can just occur in a director's mind? Elizabeth, maybe an idea, Shekhar, in your mind, and it got a full-blown journey into becoming a film. This is something which intrigues me all the time.
So I can answer that. Elizabeth was one line, right? It was Indira Gandhi's story for me. Simple, you know. Why does a woman have to declare herself a virgin and become powerful? So that line was, she wasn't really a virgin. Virginity was a political statement. So the question was why? Why did she have to do that? Why did she have to become the Virgin Mary in a way? Men don't have to, do away with masculinity to get power. Why do women have to do away with their feminism? So even at that time, it was a very fact. That's the one line with Elizabeth that I started. That was it. Why did she have to declare herself a virgin? Okay, so just
Yeah,
what provokes
yeah, I
you?
know.
What do you
I'm
have?
saying Vani, what Vani said is that I think both works, even if it's an event or it's a book, because there are many writers, I mean, book writers, they may not be screenplay writers as such, but their books are almost like a screenplay. For example, I don't know, have you read Namesake? Uh,
Yeah.
but there are many other books like that which are written like a screenplay, but I think like it gives a platform. So what Pratiksha was saying. So I think book is a very good platform at the moment where uh, you have a ready, assured, you know, that this story is should be told, or it's there at least. Now it's absolutely for the screenplay writer and the director to, of course, take this forward. Um, but ultimately, whatever, I mean, the screenplay, of course, the writer puts in. Uh, there are many kinds of screenplay writers that I have been also interacting. Some writers are there who are ready with the script and then come to you and, okay, here's the script. Uh, in my case, I have always collaborated with the writers, and I have always been in the process when the writer is writing. So that makes me much more in a comfortable space in terms of, because I exactly know how that vision that the screenplay writer is putting into that particular moment. Um, I am aware of that because both of us are reliving that moment there as a character and as a situation. Um, and also as an event, of course, now for the event is much more tougher job for a screenplay writer because I think you will have to close the bracket from pre and the post and a lot of things and whatever the screenplay writers go through. So I think there are not many techniques of a screenplay that I know of. Most of the film, when I put it in a perspective and see it, more or less one matches with the other. It's just the characters and the essence of those characters that the director juices out. I think that just makes it different. But more or less the screenplay techniques, I don't see there are many different ways. There are very few techniques. Those are, you start the story, you end the story, or you end the story and you start the story, or you start from the middle and go to the beginning and the end. There's only few process that you can, permutations that you can go on.
एक बात
I
मैं कहना
आप
चाहूँ।
रूमी जी आप बात कर रहे थे मिस्टर इंडिया की, तो आई रिमेम्बर मिस्टर इंडिया वाज, मुझे समझ नहीं आ रही थी कैसे बनाऊं. So I said, Shekhar ji, how should I play Gambo? So I said, play it. You're a Shakespearean actor. Play it like Shakespeare. He said, what? Play it like Shakespeare? I said, yeah, play it like Shakespeare. If you're playing 12-year-old kids who've never heard of Shakespeare and live in a village, that's it, that idea. But in describing that, I was describing myself, 12-year-old, who knew nothing about Shakespeare. And so when I was filming, I always had myself sitting next to me. That 12-year-old next to me who didn't know anything about ye kar kar hai. So I would take a shot, and I would ask my 12-year-old, what do you think? And the 12-year-old said, "Arey, boring cheez hai, kya kar rahe ho?" Then I would redo it. So I was constantly having a dialogue with a 12-year-old version of me that was completely unpart, who knew cinema. So we use all kinds of tricks, that's how that whole film emerged. It still runs because it was directed by a 12-year-old, not by the guy who made Bandit Queen. So just go. We play with ourselves. That's why it's so tough. We become schizophrenic people in the end. Anyway, Pratiksha, you're very silent. How do you select your directors?
वो
No,
प्रतीक्षा का
What do
my
you
my
see?
job is to listen to what our writers and directors are saying, and honestly, then just find the right ways to support them to put their vision out. Of course, we also have to think from an audience point of view, and there is a good amount of data that we have which tells us what our audience is responding to, what they're liking, what they're not liking. And right at the start of the session, actually before we started, I know you were discussing Korean content and Squid Game, etc. I mean, perfect example of story which is set in a completely different setting in a completely different language. And I know when we were all in the thick of pandemic, there was a lot of talk about, I think people now just want to watch happy, light stories, and here comes something extremely dark, shows a very, very dark side of humanity. And everyone across the world has been watching it and enjoying it. So uh, I think it's for us it's very important to be hearing what our makers are thinking, what our writers are thinking, but also what our audience is telling us. And a lot of our partners, a lot of our directors, producers, writers, they find great value also when we share some instances or some really rich insights about how something from one part of the world traveled to another, or how something from India has just traveled across the world, and what drew people towards it. Because at the end of the day, I'm sure that you would all agree as storytellers, there is no greater joy than seeing your story travel across and find an audience beyond what you had even expected. But I would also, I'm curious to know, Shujit, Rumiji from you, Vani, and Mr. Kapur from you also, like through streaming services, and specifically Netflix, anything you feel that's sort of allowed makers also to do something new, different, and specifically on the kind of stuff they want to write.
Rumi?
मैं बोलना चाह रहा था एक चीज़ कि एक तो एज़ ए फ़िल्म मेकर, एज़ ए राइटर, मैं बहुत एक्साइटेड हूँ जब से ये ओटीटी प्लेटफ़ॉर्म आया। उसका रीज़न ये है कि हम राइटर्स पे एक तलवार पहले लटका दी जाती है कि 2 घंटे 20 मिनट से ऊपर नहीं होना चाहिए। समझे ना? अब आप सोचिए कि अगर जैसे अभी सुजीत जो बोल रहे थे, कई किताबें मैंने पढ़ी हैं जो मैं चाहता हूँ कि इसको मैं फ़िल्म बनाऊँ। अभी जैसे महाश्वेता देवी की किताब थी, उसपे एच.एस. रविल ने संघर्ष बनाई थी। लेकिन वो महाश्वेता देवी की इतनी ग्रेट बुक थी, उसको 2.5 घंटे में लाना आसान काम नहीं था। तो अभी ओटीटी से एक एज़ ए राइटर, एज़ ए फ़िल्म मेकर मुझे क्या फ़ायदा है कि जो कंटेंट मेरे को दादागिरी की जाती है कि तुमको ये 2.25 घंटे में लिखना है, जिसमें 4 गाने भी डालना है, वो मैं आराम से 7-8 घंटे में बना सकता हूँ। तो मुझे ज़्यादा मज़ा आएगा एज़ राइटर, एज़ डायरेक्टर।
Yeah.
And if I can also just, what you said, Rumiji, just to add to that, you're absolutely right. And we've had, some examples even from India. We had this lovely film called Raat Akeli Hai that we launched last year. It's a fairly, it's a long movie, and it's a slow burn. But it did so well on our service. Not only did people come to watch it, but they stayed along to see how the entire story ends, and it breaks all the perceptions of duration and all that you said, the conventional perceptions that people tend to have when it comes to Indian films.
What's very exciting, Pratiksha, as far as the OTT platforms is concerned, I have done 2 book acquisitions recently as a producer, and I think it's the return of the author. Despite the fact that it gets constantly debated whether you need writer rooms, whether 2 people or 1 person writing screenplay and dialogue is pertinent anymore to the idiom or the medium. I mean, I'm not concerned with that. I think I've been extremely critical. Shekhar knows this. Shekhar knows me from my childhood. That because I belong to theatre and I belong to the world of plays, and I am Alkazi's large batch of students, my gaze when I came into the film industry was very theatrical. I always thought the script was the Bible of everything that was happening, because that is how we were trained as actors, or the school of method acting as it's called. But I think the advent of the OTT is the return of the author, the return of the book. And I think from the time of Sharat Chand Chattopadhyay and Saab Bibi aur Ghulam and all those brilliant, Tisri Kasam, Anishwar Nath Renu, and that era of cinema, in the middle there were decades and decades where we forgot that there was great literature in the country across languages. And we had forgotten that those stories belong to the country that we are. So for me, I have to stop being critical, and I think the critique should end where the effort starts to bring this literature, to the people of the country, to those audiences. And audience tastes, as you said, I think it's also a very misused term. We used to say that good cinema and bad cinema and parallel cinema and mainstream cinema, Shekhar for that matter, and I think also Shoojit and now Rumy Bhai with his work, are breaking all those molds. I mean, Mr. India was different from Masoom. Masoom was different from Bandit Queen. Bandit Queen was so different from Elizabeth. Similarly, Shoojit's work, Pink is so different from Udham Singh. You can't straight jacket and say this story will work with this audience and this story won't work. Good stories are good stories and they will always find an audience. But I think for me, it's the return of the author and the book. This literature, this absolutely great literature, which this country has always had in its wake. This is the time to tell those stories. At least for me, I'm trying hard. Writing them is very difficult, by the way. A book turning into a web series is not an easy job. Me and Shekhar had done this whole research paper last year on non-linear storytelling. And we were arguing how narratives have changed as far as non-linearity of telling stories is concerned. But I'm very excited because I think the author has just come rushing back into our lives. And I think that is what the celebration time of creating stories is right now.
No, of course, I
You
think
know,
I agree with that. All platforms and mediums can be anything, cinema, or it's an OTT or anything. I mean, we just need a huge screen to be projected something, there. So I am not um, commenting on that medium where we are coming through, but I think uh, what what I've learned from basic of cinema is that it's the collaboration of different minds who are coming together with the screenplay writer also as a mind where a director is collaborating. It can't be seen as one separate, okay, directors is doing it what the writer or the screenplay writer has done it. No, I think it's a the way the director is collaborating with the camera or the cameraman or the editor or the musician. I think the similar way it's a director's uh, you know uh, what you call coming together with the mind of a writer also, which is screenplay writer. Of course, there's a lot of writing that's sometimes derived from a director's vision also, and sometimes a lot of things is derived from a writer's vision also. Vani, there is no second doubt of the writer being absolutely on the top as a pedestrian with the director. There is no second doubt. I mean, they are as uh, um, important a filmmaker as a director too, no less. But I had, like, for example, last two films I have released on an OTT platform. Um, Both have gone on Amazon, and I have been also, when the first film I was releasing, I was also crucified for why I am doing it. So, I was taken up quite ruthlessly by even the cinema theater and everybody. So, and I only told them that, you have never seen a corona lockdown in your life. I have not seen it in my life. So, and I have made a film and I needed to move on. And I thought I should experiment with an platform. And I did it. And I had a beautiful and a fantastic response. So, which in my theater, I didn't had, so it made me more confident. Of course, I mean, like a lot of people says, Sadar Udam is not for OTT, it is for cinema. I mean, everything I made or we make is for cinema. I mean, there is no particular format that I'm making for, it is cinema. Cinema is cinema. You cannot differentiate. It's very difficult to express and explain. Cinema is cinema the way you conceive. Uh, but OTT surely has opened up a huge scope for writers and directors like us, who just doesn't bother about anything, and just move on and give your own expression.
yep. Anyone? Um, you said something, Pratiksha. The one word I scared me. You used the word data. As you were talking about, we collect data to know what the audience wants. Constantly, we've known. that the future of art lies, the progression of art lies in the ignoring of data. It's somebody to us something completely different. Data in Squid Game thought, oh, okay, this will do really well. All of data would have said, "Nee, don't do it." You know, so actually is going to be the death knell of the progress of any art. So whether it's it's not even storytelling. I am exploring at MIT. We are studying um, how do you tell stories with new technology, with VR, with AI. How do you tell stories because people are getting used to this technology. The thing that I'm constantly saying is we are not storytellers. We are provokers of story imagination. That's all we are. If storytelling came from my grandmother, what she said, but she would go and as she was telling the story, her voice would put me in a state of imagining the story in my own way. And then she suddenly said, "फिर वो आया और फिर हाँ वो आया फिर," so she would get me back to the story. And then she would gradually tell me the rest of the story, and I go into my own imagination world. And then suddenly she will take a graph, and then I would come back. So I would be connecting dots of her storytelling to create in my imagination my own story. So we should realize we've never been storytellers. We've been, if you go to verbal form of storytelling, they're imagining their own story at times, and they're connecting and not connecting, and reconnecting and not connecting. So I think that the future, that's what we're working on: is are we storytellers or are we provokers of story imagination? So we're working on what I'm sure when Netflix has announced now they're going to go into gaming. Why? Because we realize that the new generation that is coming up is not just comfortable with you telling them the story. They want you to create a world, which is what my grandmother used to do. She would create a world for me as I was a 7-year-old kid listening, but I was creating my own world out of the world she's creating for me. And that's essentially what the idea and the gaming is. You give me Mahabharat, okay, you create the world of Mahabharat, usme I want to create my world. And from that world, if I put it out, then somebody else will create a world, and somebody else will create a world. And ultimately, you're just planting the seed story. I'm sure, when Netflix going to gaming, these are the things that now because maybe the world of direct storytelling, मेरी कहानी सुनो, मेरी कहानी सुनो, मेरी कहानी सुनो, मेरी कहानी सुनो. The younger audience is getting restless with that. नहीं, हमारी कहानी सुनो, लेकिन आपकी कहानी से मैं अपनी कहानी बनाऊं. It's a different thing.
I was anticipating a similar response from you, Mr. Kapur, on the use of the word
Why?
data. But I will just say
Yeah,
one thing.
okay.
We all do 100% believe that the next great story, like there is no I mean there may not be a real data point or reference point to it because it has to be something so new and so different that you can't like create it using numbers and data, etc. I would say the insights, the data, whatever you want to call it, it doesn't have to guide you. It has to just inform you so that you know whether when you made something, where did people watch it, how did people like it. And of course, I mean, that's the fun of the creative process, right? That you take that leap and do something which is never seen before, never heard before, and no data can kind of guide you there. Then that's where the work of makers like yourself comes into play.
प्रतीक्षा पहली फिल्म मेरी थी मासूम. और जब मैंने मासूम की स्क्रिप्ट और जब अपने दोस्तों को दिखाई जो बहुत बड़े फिल्म मेकर्स थे, कितने पागल हो गया. 2 दिन नहीं चलेगी ये फिल्म. ना इसमें ड्रामा है, ना कोई विलन है. On and on about why. No, it happened with I went to when I went out to cast. I mean, everybody said, "Don't be stupid, Shekhar. This is the end of your career. Nobody's going to do this." वो वन एक फिल्म कौन देखेगा? मिस्टर इंडिया जो मैंने बात की, तो there has not been a single film that I've made. People have looked at this and said, "ये बड़ी hit film है. This is great, fantastic film. It's not done well." It's for me. It's been constantly people saying, and maybe that provokes me to make the film. I'm a rebellious by nature. So लेकिन नहीं चले, देखते हैं ना, करके देखते हैं. पैसे नहीं मिलेंगे, अरे लाके देखते हैं. It's the challenge itself too. But yeah, I mean, I remember from Masoom, big filmmakers, art filmmakers, commercial filmmakers said There's no drama, there's no villain, there's no melodrama, there's nothing. Kaun dekhega? That was my song. What data? I just wrote something from the heart, or created it from the heart, and let's see where we go. Yeah, it's a risk, but then crossing the
Absolutely.
road is a
That's
risk.
the creative
Living
process.
life is a risk. Yeah.
We did a black and white Spanish language film called Roma, which, the world would have thought that who's going to want to watch a movie
Mm.
like this, and tremendously. And
Yeah.
a lot of makers have similar stories like we do. I'm assuming, Shujit, even when you were doing a movie like Vicky Donor, because subjects like that were not necessarily being shown on the big screen. I don't know what the immediate instinctive response of people you showed the script to, what that was like.
Yeah, it is. I mean, what
But
Shekhar
there
said,
is,
that there is a kind of a uh, set rule. I mean, so every Friday, which starts off, on the release date, which I guess it's prevalent here also, in Hollywood also, Europe also, everywhere. That, I mean, I think finally, it's that rebellious call that you have to take. That, I think what Shekhar ji has been talking about since we started, is that rebellious call, uh, and that screenplay that we started off the conversation. I think it finally boils down to that. Finally, where your starting point is, and I think the starting point for the cinema is surely that the the screenplay, those many pages, whether it's 10 page or 20 page or 100 page. I think it boils down to that. So that's the most important that we have to start with. So that's where we are.
एज ए राइटर हम लोग के पास कोई
no, in
डेटा
the
तो नहीं
big,
है,
the big,
लेकिन इस बार एक चीज जो सीखी अभी, मतलब अपने आप को अपग्रेड करते रहना चाहिए कि ऑडियंस का टेस्ट कैसे चेंज हो रहा है, वो भी हमको एज ए राइटर, एज ए फिल्म मेकर पता चलता है। कैसे पता लगा? ओटीटी से पता लगा मुझे। मैंने 92 में एक फिल्म लिखी थी अंजाम, शाहरुख और माधुरी दीक्षित। उसमें वॉयलेंस था, इतना हंगामा हुआ पूरे मुल्क में कि पार्लियामेंट में भी हंगामा हुआ। तब से मैंने कान पकड़े और कॉमेडी लिखना शुरू किया। अभी मैंने ओटीटी पे कुछ कंटेंट ऐसा देखा जिसमें इतना वॉयलेंस था और बच्चों ने पसंद किया है। सबसे बड़ी चीज जो मैंने सीखी कि मैंने अपने बेटा बेटी उनके दोस्तों से पूछा, उनको वो वेब सीरीज पसंद है। तो जो चीजें मैं लिखने से डरता था, जो थोड़ी सी वॉयलेंट होती थी, अच्छी होती थी, वो अब मैं लिखने को मुझे डर नहीं लग रहा। मुझे पता है कि अब वो हंगामा नहीं हो रहा है।
but Pratiksha, coming
So,
to the
Rumi,
data part, I definitely have one. There's a debate surging: algorithms versus storytelling. Algorithms will rule our lives. Shekhar has been saying this for decades. Shekhar even said that when Spider-Man 13 will be made, when the mask will come off, what will the mask come off as, Shekhar? You remember the Time magazine covered it as a
Well, I
opening
said when
statement from
Spider-Man
you.
6 was made. If Spider-Man 6 is made of 7, I can't remember. The mask come out, he'll be Chinese, and he'll be swinging in Shanghai and not in New York. I said that 10 years ago, 12 years ago, before this whole thing
Yes,
started.
and see 12 years later where we stand today. But Pratiksha, coming to the data bit, I think one of the dense realities of algorithm ruling our lives, it already is. Facebook runs on algorithm. It's one of the most potent social media platforms. Shekhar always says every now and then Insta stories are more interesting than stories themselves that we read every day. But having said that, algorithms don't have an emotion. And storytelling will always have an emotion. We are a land of Kathavachas. And it is that emotion which rules our lives. It's not just India. I mean, when you even look at so many stories across the world being told, they touch you, they speak to you, they almost overreach that sensibility in you to feel. Algorithms will never be able to do that. So we will keep debating what the audience likes and not likes. But I think stories which we can touch and feel, in Hindi, as we say, the narmi ki baat. I think that is something which will always remain.
No, 100%.
uh,
And
you
honestly,
know,
that's what keeps us also really excited and driven about the work that we do. And to your point, Vani, the algorithm for us at Netflix is really just designed to let you discover something much wider than what you normally would. So that if just because you are based in India, or you are sitting in a certain part of the country, or you only speak a certain language, doesn't mean that you should only be accessing certain stories. You should, if you like something from another part of the world, or a film which a genre which isn't really being made where you are, you should be able to access it. And if you like it, then that's something really valuable for us to know, and also often for the makers to know. But absolutely agree with you. I mean, the magic in storytelling is the creative process behind it, and not so much the non-creative part of it.
Just one thing that I was, रूमी जी ने आपने कहा कि ऑडियंस कैसी है और ऑडियंस को क्या मतलब समझ के, मैं आपको एक चीज बताता हूँ. दिल्ली में एक थिएटर होता था जिसका नाम था शकुंतलम. वो हमारे नेशनल स्कूल ऑफ ड्रामा के थोड़ा पास में ही है, अभी वहां पे प्रगति मैदान में. और that was the only place where all the films which were so-called not mainstream, offbeat films that we could see, nobody else, that was the only theater where I possibly saw some of the best cinema being made. I remember one film I saw was Rosa Luxemburg. किसी ने सुना भी नहीं होगा नाम, शायद Rosa Luxemburg. I remember I saw that film. But my point is, how did I see it? I was not a filmmaker. I was a sports person. I was not a born artist. No. So how could I go there and find that film and theater and watch it? One, of course, I came to know about that theater that was catering these films. So पहले भी जो हमारे गोल्डन पीरियड में जो सिनेमा बनी है, I think it's very important. उसकी is it reaching और cater करने के लिए, कहीं पे अगर कोई आदमी है दूर में कहीं पे, can he come to that theater? He cannot. What the theater did was, the theater took those films to those people, and then we started telling that no, इंसान का इंटेलिजेंस बदल गया है. इंटेलिजेंस कैसे बदल सकता है? वो तो वैसा ही था. इंटेलिजेंस कोई अजीब तो नहीं हो गया, कहीं बदल तो नहीं गया, नहीं बदल सकता, वो था वैसे. We never catered to them, possibly. We didn't had the system to cater to them. Otherwise, मैं ये सोचता हूँ कि जैसे वानी ने कहा, ये एनएसडी में थी, इन्होंने बचपन से किताबें पढ़ी हैं, ये किताबें पढ़ी, कैसे पढ़ लिया? इनके पास कहीं दुकान में जाके खरीदा होगा, मिल गया होगा, पढ़ लिया होगा, या लाइब्रेरी होगी. So I think only present zamana में जो हुआ है, I think the only thing that's happened is we are able to cater to people. That's what the change has happened. Making, or the cinema, or the technique, or the screenplay, or everything, I think that's all been evolving, of course, but I think we are able to cater much better now, and that's why we are saying that audience is changing. But I don't think so audience is changed. The audience is intelligent anyway.
रूमी जी, आप क्या सोचते हैं जब फिल्म बनाने से पहले? what assumptions do you make before you make a film?
जैसे सुजीत जी
I mean,
बोल
these are
रहे हैं
data.
कि
I mean, it's not just Netflix that has data in our mind. When a white police officer in the middle of America assumes that a young teenage black boy is running, he assumes कि उसने किसी को मारा होगा. That's data. वो अपनी बंदूक निकाल के कि उसको मार देता है. Why? What is that reaction based on? It's based on data that's sitting in his head. So data can also make you respond to what they're trying you to make you respond to. So you become part of what the data wants you to do. And that's what we've seen. I remember once, very big director in India, नाम नहीं लूंगा, कहता है यार मैं पृथ्वी थिएटर जाकर देखूंगा फिल्में तो मेरा दिमाग उलट जाएगा. I will not be in tune with the audience. Where's that data coming from? I am in tune with the audiences. किसी से पूछो जाकर इंडिया में ये पिक्चर कैसी है, कहते हैं यार मैसेज के लिए बहुत अच्छी है. उनसे पूछो मैसेज कौन है, वो कभी मैसेज नहीं होते, वो बाकी दूसरे लोग हैं, ये दूसरे लोग हैं, डेटा है हमारे हाथ में, ये कौन है ये दूसरे लोग, यू नो? ओके, ठीक है. ऑलराइट, आई थिंक वी आर रनिंग आउट ऑफ टाइम. रूमी जी, एक बात आप बोल दो, देन आई नो द ऑर्गेनाइजर्स विल बी टेलिंग अस टू wrap up. Been fascinating for me, guys. Great fans of everybody
Thank you.
here.
Thank you, sir.
इंडिया वापस आना पड़ेगा मुझे एक और फिल्म बनाने. What do you think? And then we'll wrap up.
कुछ नहीं, यही है कि मतलब एक अच्छा डिस्कशन हुआ. कुछ चीजें मैंने आपसे, सुजीत से, सबसे, प्रतीक्षा से सीखी. और बस यही चाहता हूँ कि एक मतलब होता ना कि हम लोग, जो आप लोग कोशिश कर रहे हो सब, कि हमको सचमुच मतलब जैसे अभी जमाना चल रहा है, नया कंटेंट, नई स्क्रिप्ट, नया स्क्रीन प्ले. हाँ, ये बात जो सुजीत से मैं पूरी तरह एग्री नहीं करता कि ऑडियंस तब भी हुई थी, मेरा नाम जो करता फ्लॉप हुई, आज लोगों को पसंद आती है, आम पब्लिक को भी. मतलब हम उसको मास नहीं बोल सकते, जैसे शेखर कपूर ने बोला हर आदमी वो है, तो पूरी तरह एग्री नहीं करता हूँ. बहुत सारी चीजें पहले लोगों को अच्छी लगती थी, अब अच्छी लगती हैं, लेकिन हमको राइटिंग में अब जमाना ऐसा आ गया है कि हमको एक्सपेरिमेंट करने में मजा आ रहा है, क्योंकि लोग एक्सेप्ट कर रहे हैं. तो नई चीजें, नया कंटेंट, नए एक्सपेरिमेंट करते रहना चाहिए. और एज ए राइटर मैं पूरी कोशिश करूंगा. आप लोग तो अच्छा काम कर ही रहे हैं, मैं भी कुछ नया करने की कोशिश कर रहा हूँ, करूंगा. थैंक यू.
And also, what Netflix is doing is making, and other platforms are making the cost of failure lower. You know, the cost of failure on screen is huge because of this Netflix. It's not naturally.
मैं
It's
बोला
not.
मैं इतना एक्साइटेड हूँ, क्योंकि क्या मेरी एक स्क्रिप्ट है जो मैंने 5 साल पहले, मतलब प्रियंका उसको कर रही थी, बंद कर दी थी, क्योंकि वो 2.5 घंटे में नहीं बन पा रही थी. तो अभी मेरी बात हुई कि अब हम उसको ओटीटी बना सकते हैं, क्योंकि अब हम 5 घंटे भी बना सकते हैं. तो ये एज ए राइटर, एज ए फिल्म मेकर के लिए बड़ा बड़ा एक्साइटिंग टाइम है. फिल्म भी बनाऊंगा थिएटर के लिए और ओटीटी के लिए.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Been great.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Shekhar ji.
Thank-
Thank you, Vani,
Thank you.
Pratiksha.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Shekhar.
Rumi ji.
Thank you.
All
Thank you,
right.
everybody.